I tell him I don't really carry cash. He says, I was really hoping for at least $15, and pulls out a knife. So now I'm panicking and pulling out my wallet at the next red light. People that rent out their car as a service. What is your customer horror story? Picked up a guy in Hollywood at 1 a.m. who wanted a lift to the valley. I became increasingly concerned as we drove up into the hills. He told me to turn into a completely dark nature reserve. He told me that his girlfriend was a land use manager for the park and he was going to stay with her overnight. We drove through the dark winding roads of Fryman Canyon, and I honestly thought he was going to kill me. There was also a car following us. Turned out, he was right. His girlfriend did live out there, and I wasn't harassed at all. The car following us was a park ranger wondering what the heck I was doing out there so late. During grad school I rented my car out for maybe 6 months on relay rides, now called Turo. It went great for a long time. $40 a day buys people a small Nissan sedan. I live in Chicago and people would use it to drive home to Ohio or Michigan or Wisconsin. I work and live downtown and use CTA to get from A to B, and it's no problem. One girl is even a repeat customer. She's a makeup artist and uses it to get to wedding gigs in the burbs. Then I'll lend it out to a hot young chick for 3 days. Third day she asks for an extension with some BS excuse. Whatever, I'll take the money. Next day she returns it, and go to get the keys, and she shows me the back bumper. It's bold in wood on the driver's side. I'm not really sure how you make that happen, unless someone hits you going very slowly or you're back in an odd direction into a hydrant, and tries to sob story me. I take the keys and lodge a complaint. Use Turo's app to get it fixed. As I drive I notice the smell of weed in my car, and eventually find an unfamiliar lighter under my seat that says flick my bick. All the while I'm getting sob stories from this girl because it's the holidays and she won't be able to pay the bills if I finalize the complaint, because Turo is going to charge her like $500 of the $800 they are going to pay for my new bumper. Baiachi hotboxed my car and wrecked the bumper. Life has consequences. I should have charged you more. My mom drives for Uber. Probably like 2 months ago, she picked up this guy from a club, drunk off his butt. His friend had ordered the ride for him, so this guy kept asking my mom to pull over so he could pee. I guess one of those times, he had squatted his butt down into a bush and taken a poop. He came back to the car with poop on his clothes. Got poop on the seats and on the backs of the front seats. Oh, and he peed his pants in the car. My mom made sure he made it home safe, but his friend got a surprise $150 charge for cleaning. She's only been driving for around 6 months, but this is just one of many stories. People have puked, spit all over her floor, tried to not pay, attempted to solicit sex, etc. I got a pickup for one of the satellite buildings of a local hospital. No big deal. I've picked up and dropped off people there before and I had never had an issue. As it turns out, the department I was picking up from was the rehab clinic for the area. As you may or may not know, there's a 5-minute wait time from the moment we arrive. App determines it, not us, to the moment when the driver can simply cancel and collect the cancellation fee. For obvious reasons, we tend to keep a sharp eye on the clock. The time was getting close to the 5-minute mark when I got a text. A nurse or doctor on the inside was using Uber to transfer a patient. Okay, still no big deal, I guess. About 10 seconds later, some bedraggled guy comes out a bit unsteadily and asks if I'm here for doctor. I said yes, and he said that he was the transfer. He got in, and I started the trip to discover that the trip was for 70 miles away to another rehab clinic. Now, long trips are my jam. I get paid well for them. They're easier and less stressful than a bunch of little trips, so I was pleased. Not 2 minutes into the trip, he was like, "Hey man, I don't really want to go there. Take me over there instead." He wasn't asking, he was telling. Already, I'm uncomfortable and decide it's easier to just do what this guy wants rather than stick to the requested destination. He can't pick out exactly which way he wants me to go, so just starts telling me to turn onto random streets. Some point during this adventure, he asks me how much cash I had on me. Red flags all around now. I tell him I don't really carry cash. He sighs, says, "I was really hoping for at least $15, and pulls out a small knife. So now I'm panicking and pulling out my wallet at the next red light. I had $5 from someone who tipped me earlier that day, but nothing else. He took the bill and told me to keep going. Christ, I'm shaking a little just telling the story. We arrive at what I assume is a drug house. Guy tells me to wait for him and gets out of the car. I can only assume that he was desperate for his next hit or whatever, and so didn't really think that through. I shut and locked the door and took off as soon as he was across the street. Went home, reported it to Uber. I didn't file a police report because it was only $5, and Uber said they'd take care of it. I don't really believe it, but I didn't really want to deal with anything else that day anyway. I drive for Uber and Lyft as my sole means of income right now. It's never a dull moment. I've done about 1,600 rides with Uber and close to 1,000 with Lyft in 1 year. Most passengers are awesome. I never have issues, even with drunk people. One night though, this drunk girl and her drunk friends get in the car and are acting really obnoxious. I even joined in the banter a little bit to keep the ride fun. Going down a dangerous road at about 45 miles per hour. The girl sitting behind me reaches forward and covers my eyes and pulls my head back against the headrest, jokingly saying something about, "What time is it?" without looking. Game over. I was pissed. Lucky for them we weren't far from their destination, otherwise I would have left them on the side of the road. I pulled over after dropping them off, and left a lengthy complaint with Lyft about a dangerous passenger. I rented my previous car out on Duro. I worked a few blocks from my house so I never used it. Let a guy rent it for a week to take it to the beach. Someone shit in the trunk. Never got an answer why. Never got the stain out. I used to drive for Uber and Lyft. Had some bad ones, usually the very drunk, but for the most part everything was great and went very smoothly. My horror story came from a ride I gave off the books, as it were. Pulled up to the pickup location. Girl comes out, the one who ordered the ride, and explains she ordered it for her friend. The card connected to the account has no money on it, but she offers me $20 for the ride in cash. Whatever. I needed the money, and the spot she said her friend needed to go was relatively close. Would have been well under $20 if it was charged through the app. I agree, and she signals to this very tall guy who walks down from the porch. Red flags were already going off. This guy gets in the back and we take off. I consider myself a pretty social and outgoing person, and soon into the ride this guy and I are talking about all sorts of things, from basketball to movies, as well as our destin for traffic in the large city we live in. 5 minutes or so of this, and he brings up his love for firearms. Next red flag, asks if I own any. I don't, and inform him as such. He then proceeds to pull out 2 handguns from his backpack, explaining how he just picked them up the other day and loves them. Even flashes them to me in the rearview mirror. I'm fully freaking out internally, but I keep my cool as we're nearing the destination. As we pull up to this guy's house, he explains that he is a drug dealer and that he really enjoyed our conversation, and thinks I'd make a great driver for him as he makes his drops. I explain that I'm not interested, but thanked him for the compliment. Unfortunately, he was fairly insistent I start working for him and would not exit the car till I gave him my phone number. He somehow bought the fake number I gave him and told me he'd call me soon. As soon as he was out of my car, I took off. That was one of the last nights I drove for Uber and Lyft. If the number I randomly gave out actually belongs to anyone, I apologize if you got a late night call from Tim. A friend had their car on getaround. Got it back and second gear was gone. GPS tracking showed it at over 120 miles per hour multiple times. Was dirty and smelled like weed. In fairness, getaround got the transmission fixed and they were all squared up after. But that car is no longer on getaround. My friend is an Uber driver. Apparently he wasn't paying attention and some guy jerked off in the backseat. No, I have no idea how it's possible to not notice something like that. But anyway, so he had to clean what was like 14 gallons of jizz out his car. The dude was like part horse or something. I used to drive for Uber in a tourist town. I had a group of 40-ish-year-old men one night. I was taking downtown from their Airbnb. It was one guy's birthday and he kept telling me I was cute. When we arrived at their destination, he kept asking me for a kiss because it was his birthday. I told him to get the F out of my car before I tasered him. After the third no, I reported the incident to Uber. but they didn't seem to care. I missed this, but when I drove Uber, I picked up 5 dudes who were going bar hopping. The guy sitting in the middle center seat is barely keeping his head up, but we got a party raid deposit bin in the back, so we're good. No, we're not. The smell hits me about 5 minutes out from the bar. His friends immediately diagnose the issue. Lucas. Got, again? Lucas had explosively pooped his pants. We suffered together the final stinky 3 blocks, and I dropped them off. They pulled their buddy out, and everyone walked into the bar, seemingly unfazed. Filed the cleaning, quit Uber the next week. I drive a massive passenger van for Lyft, so I get some wacky party groups. I've got plenty of stories, but this one in particular comes to mind. I had driven Lyft for about 4 months at this point, and I get a request to pick up a bunch of girls on a Saturday about noon. I arrive at the location and quickly realize that these ladies are frigged. They are in town for a bachelorette party and got torn up at lunch. Midway through the ride, they start getting very sexual towards me. They're pulling at my britches and trying to yank my chain and are talking about me just staying with them for the night. They start talking about how one of the ladies had just had a baby. We hit a red light, so I'm stopped. The lady in the front seat takes my face and pulls it, so I'm looking at the back captain seats. All newly mommed gal has her boobies out in the captain seat and she shoots some breast milk no more than 2 inches from my face. I'd say 4 solid ropes were sent my way. Green light. Luckily I had some paper towels in the van, and one of the more sober women wiped it up. Thanks for listening to another episode of The Reality of an Uber Driver. Hit the subscribe button to become a real ice cream sandwich. And please, treat other people's property with respect. Imagine the poor Uber driver having to clean poop off his back seat. Not nice.